All right, dude, you want to play that drop?
Yeah, I've got it queued up. We're going to do this kind of grab bag special style, I think, dear listener. It was a very long press conference. It goes 43 minutes and 24 seconds. I'm going to take it from about 12 minutes in, and let's just take a gander at this. No specific content. We don't know exactly where this is, but it all was pretty horrible, so we'll just take it from 12 minutes. Here we go.
Discrimination incidents for quite some time. Our office is directly responsible for that, and what we can confirm is that there is a consistent rise, as there has been a rise in anti-Semitism, attacks of anti-Semitism and others. There's been a consistent rise in anti-Muslim bias incidents and hate crimes and attacks against Muslims at mosques. And although this seems to go unreported or unnoticed in media, our offices around the country get reports on a regular basis of harassments as innocuous or as sort of day-to-day banal things like people getting harassed in grocery stores, in streets, or getting chased down on highways, to as terrible as murders, in Indiana just a couple of weeks ago that no national press actually covered. And so it's absolutely necessary that we don't wait until we have horrific situations like this, horrific incidents of kind of global importance, to pay attention to this issue. I'll be quite honest, right now it seems to be the case that we only look at fires, but we smell the burning smoke from miles and miles away and we ignore it. We say, oh, there's some burning smoke, there might be something, and we only pay attention when the fire is brought directly into our face. I'll say that the fire is there, it's brewing, it's international, and it has a source, it has a cause, it has a structure to it. And so the one thing that we have to pay attention to, I'll depart from conversations about statistics for just a second, is we have to pay attention to the ideology that breeds this kind of activity. Hate has the same DNA everywhere that you see it. Okay? Hate has the same DNA everywhere that you see it. It has the same goals in mind. The same pathological ideologies that exist in this manifesto, which God forbid you would actually take the time to read, exist in the manifestos of other mass murderers around the world. They are directly related to ideas that are carried out in certain quarters in our own society, that exist in radio shows, that exist in TV shows, that have dog whistles by mainstream politicians, by mainstream news commentators. And so we have to recognize that that is the smoke. That is the burning smoke that's out there that tells us where the fire is. And we, as a community, have to take control and leadership back in our public space. It is not the case that this is some random marginal activity on the internet in some kind of close dark web or something. No, this stuff is mainstream now. Hate has the same DNA. You can recognize it where it is, and you have to put a stop to it. We have to ask our TV networks to be responsible. We have to ask our social media platforms to be responsible. We have to ask our charities and philanthropic communities to be responsible and not allow these people to to exploit freedom of speech, exploit nonprofit covers. These are hate groups, special interest groups with a very nefarious agenda, and we have to be able to take that activity back. So with that, I'll leave. If anybody has any questions about the specifics about the manifesto, I can get into it later. I'd rather not go into those kind of details here. Thank you.
All right. Well, what do you think about that, man?
Yeah, so this was actually the segment that I listened to yesterday, I believe, or maybe the day before. No, it was yesterday because it happened on Friday. So, yeah, this is when I saw this, when I was listening to it, I was actually at work and I had it playing in the background, and I was just like, my God, they're tying this back to Trump. Like,
yeah,
what they're trying to do is this is chicanery, is what it is. They are trying to. So first of all, Russ, you and I both know that this does happen on the dark web and in the dark corners of the internet. Like,
absolutely.
This is not Reddit. Okay. This is not happening on Facebook. This is not happening on Twitter. And when it does, it gets shut down really fast. Quickly.
Yep.
Quickly. Okay, so like, first of all, yes, it is the dark corners of the internet. And no, yep, you cannot paint this as being like Trump is like the spearhead, the fountainhead of white supremacy, and it's all just dog whistling. No, like, just because you want to enforce border control does not mean that you are Hitler incarnate, which is like what he's basically saying here. Yeah, it's just total insanity. And then you notice the very subtle attack on, not subtle, but like the quite blatant
Yeah, pretty blatant
attack on free speech. He's like, we need to hold our social media platforms accountable. We
our
need
television networks.
Yeah. So basically, what he is now, this guy sounds very intelligent. He sounds very well spoken. He sounds very smart, like very friendly. But what he's calling for is like a French or a Denmark style of regulation of free speech, where now you can no longer criticize Islam. That is not American. That is not America. If that is what you want, go somewhere else. That's not America.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's ideological jihad. Let's call it for what it is. It's absolute ideological jihad, dear listener. Nothing less than that. It is about control.
Yes, indeed. And like I said a minute ago that I wanted to talk about the Islamic community, the Islamic world's reaction to this. Like, you know what? Here's my take on this. And look, before I get into this, I just want to say, yes, I totally abhor everything that happened regarding this. I obviously condemn this in the strongest terms possible. Okay. So I'm not coming out. This is not a defense of this guy, but this is actually what I am about to say is actually an attack on the Islamic community itself, in as much as their standards are so hollow and inconsistent that they, to me, don't have any value when the Islamic world comes out and condemns this. They don't have my permission to be upset about this, because human life is not their standard of value, as is evidenced by the fact that they don't even bat an eye when ISIS genocides and enslaves the Yazidis in northern Iraq. Where was the Islamic community when that happened?
Right.
Where was the Islamic community when women were being raped, children were being enslaved, and men were being beheaded? The Yazidis in northern Iraq. Where was the Islamic community then?
Yeah.
It's necessarily our condemnation of this event, of this horrific event of 49 people murdered. It's necessarily the case that it's only our condemnation, therefore, that could possibly hold any meaning in the first place.
Yep.
Their condemnation is hollow. It is empty, because they don't have standards. We do.
Yeah.
Their standard is
said.
Muslim lives. The left's is the destruction of the right, and America as what it is today. And in that sense, Islam, they're standing for something at the very least. They're at least standing for Muslim lives, whereas the left, they're just against the right, which is they have the chicanery of the left in this sense. But my biggest takeaway from this, Russ, is that in choosing to so publicly condemn this act of violence in the Islamic community, they are saying that they chose not to condemn other acts of violence, such as when ISIS buries people alive, drowns them, beheads them, enslaves people, tortures them, and genocides thousands of Yazidis, men, women, and children, among many others, Christians, all sorts of people. I chose specifically to focus on the Yazidis to make because they are an objective example. I don't want to make this like a Christian versus a Christianity versus Islam conversation here. So I wanted to choose like an objective third party that Islam was totally silent on, so far as I could see. I mean, they certainly weren't, CAIR was not making, doing press conferences about this, right?
Never, not one.
Talking about our religion's been corrupted by ISIS. Where were they on that? Yeah. So we can now retroactively, in other words, we can now retroactively understand that they chose not to condemn those past events. That was an active choice. They chose not to condemn what ISIS was doing, for example. And this is really telling of that community. That's my takeaway on this. So their condemnation of this, to me, spoke more to what they chose not to condemn than anything else.
Yep. Absolutely. And, another parallel argument that I would bring up into evidence for this, for the purposes of what Luke is saying, dear listener. All right. Remember the San Bernardino shooting back in 2015? All right. I'm looking at Wikipedia right now. I just pulled this up because it just came to mind. There is a section in the wiki about Muslim reaction, and it says American Muslim organizations, including Council on American Islamic Relations and Islamic Society for Orange County, condemned the attacks. Okay, yeah, they did condemn the attacks, dear listener, but it took them days to condemn the attacks.
Yeah.
And it was the Muslim couple that went in and shot up the school. It took them days. They basically condemned it because they had to, because they were so being called out by everybody on the right for their silence. They finally had to condemn it. But as they condemned it, at the same time, dear listener, and I'm reading from the wiki again, in the aftermath of the shooting, days after the shooting, CAIR reported an escalation in anti-Muslim hate crimes. Of course you did. Of course you did. Greatest victim class in the entire world. And listen, I don't want to be hateful about it, but like your silence on Muslim violence is deafening.